Hi, well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today to our presentation, our webinar here on digital accessibility, what it means, why it's important, and what you should know, presented by O8 and Accessible360. So my name is Corey Dockin. I am with O8. And just maybe before we get started, I'm just going to give before I hand it over to Accessible360, I'm just going to give a quick snapshot of O8 and who we are. Which is on the next slide.
Can we click over to the next one? There we go.
So just real quick. So O8, we are a digital agency in Minneapolis, and we take a holistic approach to all our projects. So what does that mean? We incorporate our digital innovation opportunity framework, which is it's a methodology encompassing user experience and CRO and SEO to drive results for our clients. So our clients are our true partners. We're really more or less like an extension of their marketing teams. And what I mean by teams, like our team, you get a very like digital, very technical team in the areas of web development, specific to WordPress and Drupal, as well as strategies to drive digital marketing results. So that's who O8 is. We're very proud to be partnering with A360. We got Mary and Michelle here, who are gonna give us a little bit more info on their company and dive into the content.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Corey. This is Mary Brockman with Accessible360. We're super excited about our partnership with O8. Especially if you consider over the past couple of months with COVID, we're starting to see e-commerce and digital services become more relevant than ever before. Of course, some of the motivators behind it are positive. You know, again, e-commerce is booming. Unfortunately, schools, higher education are closed, but because of that, the reliance for online educational resources, that keeps growing. So, you know, as we move more and more online, the need for accessibility is growing. Some of the other challenges or motivators behind interest in accessibility are positive, you know, and negative as well. You know, as some of you guys may be aware of the litigation that is happening. You may be hearing about it within your industry, or you yourself may have seen some type of litigious letter. We feel that corporations who use this time as an opportunity to innovate and ensure that their websites and apps are accessible, you're going to look back on this as a turning point for your business. Not only is it the socially responsible thing to do, but you'll find that it's going to have a financial impact on your business as well. As you can imagine, ADA compliance, it is a complicated topic with a broad reach. So we're super thrilled to see so many different types of companies represented on the call today. Again, we're super passionate about ensuring equal access to all, and we're happy to offer up some ideas and strategies on how you can apply accessibility to your own digital properties. Our goal today is to shed some light on accessibility. We have Michelle Landis. Michelle Landis is a co-founder with A360. She's been teaching continuing legal education classes here in the States for years, and most recently moved her learnings internationally. Super excited about that. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Michelle. Again, she's the dynamo behind A360. She's co-founder. She is on the front lines of accessibility. We've budgeted an hour for this, and of course, we're happy to stay a little bit longer for questions. So with that, Michelle, if you could take it away.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you very much to our new partners at O8, and Corey, thanks for having us on, and thanks for your whole team over there. In full disclosure, we are geographically very close to O8. So we are coming to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota as well. This snapshot of our company, Accessible360, shows one of the social media drawing points in Uptown here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's a huge mural the size of the building, But in this picture is a picture of our team from about a year and a half ago. We're then again, I think another 50% bigger than this picture shows. And we work already remotely across the United States. We are a team of accessibility-only specialists. We are a collection of ex-agency people. Again, just to give you a little bit of insight into us, our Chief Technology Officer, Kelly Heikkila, affectionately known as K2 for years, he used to own his own mobile app development company called Code Row. Our other notable co-founder, Mark Lasik, is a veteran, and when he's not around, and he isn't on today, so I will call him this, the godfather of loyalty, excuse me. Mark started his foray into digital agencies years ago in the 80s with the Frequent Flyer Miles program for Northwest Airlines here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Mark led multiple teams and multiple companies through exits. The largest sale on record of an agency was Olson, which was a roll-up from his company, Denali. So super proud of our deep agency roots. This is what makes us such a great partner for agencies to work on your client's behalf for you. We have another really notable co-founder, Aaron Cannon. I'll get into a little bit of him in a minute. You've had time to kind of look at the snapshot slide of Accessible360. The main thing to take away here is that we are an accessibility-only company. We're a court-certified live user accessibility auditing firm. So all the work that we used to do in our different jobs at agencies, we don't do anymore, and all we do is accessibility. And that's the first reason why we're in such a great position to support 08 in their initiatives to help their clients. We are a very mission-driven organization. Our auditing team is made up of many stakeholders, blind technologists who are all past web developers, software engineers, product managers, that type of thing. Super proud of all of our auditors. We employ the same people we're trying to help. We have also been nationally recognized in many of the landmark cases, and I'll weave a few of those stories in through today. But let's go ahead and kick it off with the basis of our partnership with 08. 08 is recognized as award-winning top web design and development agency, and they consider usability for all users. 08 came to A360, and we are super excited, as Mary and I said, to launch this. When you can work with an agency that cares about equitable access for all, you can really affect the website accessibility initiatives in mass, and that's what we're hoping to do with helping all of you starting your initiative. Accessible360, again, we do live user audits, we do live tested QA, we do issue letters of conformance, because as I said in my intro, we are a court-certified auditing company. We also do live user verified monitoring. We can provide legal rebuttal reports. We have provided expert witness testimony, and we consider ourselves very much a consultant, right, working on your behalf. We've done over 620 project clients, and none of them have been the same as any other. So really looking forward to getting to know who's out there and how we can help. When we start talking about this, it's really important that people understand, what do we mean by digital accessibility? We define it as the inclusive practice of removing barriers that prevent any interaction with websites, apps, enterprise systems for people with disabilities. The picture that I have on the screen is one of a building with a brick of cement ramp up to it, right, and a universal access sign with a stick man in a wheelchair. Beneath that is a picture of both, all 4 different sizes of digital screens, everything from a phone to an iPad to a laptop to a desktop. So when we're working with teams, we're not only looking at just a desktop website, but we're looking at all of their digital products and how they scale across all different size screens. There are 4 types of disabilities that we audit for during our live user audits. They are the same 4 that are covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, which incidentally will be celebrating our 30th anniversary of the signing of the ADA this July 26th. So that's pretty exciting, and it makes me feel really old to think that that was signed 30 years ago. But as it relates to the 4 disabilities on the screen, most of the success criteria, the testing that we do, incidentally, we use an international standard brought to us by the W3C. Again, there's more information coming up on that, but just to level set, we do not use our own set of guidelines. We're using the industry standard established web content accessibility guidelines. And in those, there are 4 different areas, as illustrated on the screen. There are very few tests for cognitive disability. In the next rounds coming up, I think in a year or in the future, there will be more success tests or auditing tests that we'll do for cognitive disabilities, but there are very few as it stands right now. Auditory is very easily solved, especially with a sophisticated agency like 08. The main players out there, YouTube, Vimeo, Brightclove, lots of the other ones that we work with all the time, have made it very easy to offer equitable access when you're playing a movie. The thing you need to remember with that movie is, can you, without your mouse, start the movie, navigate to it, right? Start it or launch it, pause it, and then escape away from it. So those are some things that we help our agencies and our shared clients do. The bulk of our work, everyone, is really in the visual and physical disabilities areas. Most of the success criteria within the WCAG guidelines cover either visual disabilities, including total blindness, or physical disabilities. When we refer to keyboard-only navigation, what we're talking about is navigating a website or mobile app for somebody who does not have the physical capabilities that I do, and I know a lot of my co-presenters today have. So instead of using a mouse on a website, can you do everything with keyboard-only navigation? So you'll hear that term brought up quite a bit if you haven't already. A place that I really like to start is the baseline, understanding that there are a multitude of different types of assistive technology out there. The one that gets talked about the most is the screen reader. The JAWS for Windows and NVDA are 2 of the market leaders in this. JAWS was leading for years, and NVDA is kind of closing on them now. But also down here in the bottom, we have the logos for iOS TalkBack, or excuse me, Android TalkBack and iOS VoiceOver. Closed captioning is another type of assistive technology up here in the upper left. This is an iRetinal mouse. So instead of using a finger tracker like I am and a pointer, this device will actually track somebody's eye movements for each keystroke. And it's amazing how much work can be done by persons that have total paralysis or paralysis that would not allow them to use their hands in order to navigate. This small laptop over here on the right-hand side, that's a refreshable Braille display. Now, the truth of the matter is Braille is probably not taught as often as it used to be, right, because of all these other digital assistive technologies on the market for younger people who have blindness. But there are many people, including our huge baby boomer population, where if they can't see things, they will use this refreshable Braille display, and the Braille alphabet will actually raise and lower along the keyboard here as the emails or articles or whatever the person is reading is filtered through the system. I tried one of these a couple of years ago on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I'm sure I would get better in time, but it was very difficult for me to use. When you're looking to understand the concept of how assistive technologies interact with the concept of digital accessibility, all you need to understand is that when your digital content is correctly designed and coded, it offers access to information and functionality via these. So in other words, there's nothing you lay over your website, install on your website, or hook your website up to that causes equitable access or things to work for people using assistive technology. It's the work that your agency does with the digital code that enables equitable access. So you fix the code to work with every type of assistive technology. You don't do things like install a screen reader on a website. So anyway, again, we will be taking questions. If there are any questions, please raise your hand. Corey and Hadley will either take the question from you via chat and ask it, or have you participate live, but I certainly hope that you'll ask any questions as we go through this. This is a picture of Aaron Cannon. Aaron Cannon is another co-founder at Accessible360. And as Chief Accessibility Officer, he led many of the functions at A360 as we grew up as a company. Aaron has been blind since birth. He became a full-stack web developer, software engineer. He worked at an agency for years. And then back in 2007, he started actually doing live user accessibility testing and QA, just folded into his job as a developer. Since 2011, though, Aaron's been working as a full-time accessibility engineer, and he's worked in huge companies prior to A360, like Instructure on the Canvas learning system at Kuali, and other things. This demo out on YouTube is a demo of the JAWS screen reader, and I'm going to just pause and kind of continue to go through the presentation at this point, and then when we get to a more interactive part of it, if we'd like to jump out to YouTube and play that, I would like to do that for you. If you haven't ever heard JAWS being read, it is, typically read very, very fast. And Aaron does a nice job of slowing it down in this video so we can kind of keep up. Let's talk about the number of people with disabilities. This is not a small group of people. Why do we do this work? Why is it so important? The US population, the recent updates are that 61 million people in the United States live daily with a disability. There are over 1 billion people globally with a disability of one form or another. Men present one of the initial areas of concern whenever building or auditing a website or mobile app, and that is color contrast. This comes right into the design of things. One really poor example of bad use of color contrast is our own Minnesota Wild hockey team. The reason for that is that red on green, for a lot of people who have color blindness, they can't even see a distinction between there. So I'll leave my personal feelings about red and green as a team color choice on the side, but that's one really good example where people can struggle. This hits U.S. families hard. 1 in 3 of us have at least one member with a disability. It's important to remember that person may not always have that disability, but even a child breaking their hand that they write with, or somebody, an older member of the family, or even a younger, having a stroke and losing the use of their hands for a period of time, people can flow in and out of disability as well. So that's really important to understand as you think about how many people this affects. For businesses, there is an estimated $544 billion of spending power or discretionary income from people with disabilities. So keep in mind that whether you're providing a service, a learning opportunity, or a website or app that sells goods and services, when you stop and think about, you might be limiting your ability to sell those goods and services, and you learn that digital accessibility might be a way to increase that, it makes great sense. So the need for digital accessibility has been growing over the years. It's grown a tremendous amount over the past 5 years. One area of huge concern is inaccessible HR portals. And the reason is they exclude millions of people from searching for jobs. When I first met Aaron, we did a test of the Minnesota top employers. And he was overqualified for an entry-level development job, but he tried to apply at many of them, and the results were really dismal. Not only did he have trouble just filling out the application, but attaching a resume. And then on a couple of them that actually got him that far, they then required a pre-employment screening test. And of course, that test was not accessible. And so Aaron also shares stories about moving back to Minnesota and filling out a mortgage application for a home. It wasn't accessible. So he has to call and get somebody on the phone and ask them to help him do that. And it really takes a tick at people's own independence, right? The right to live independently and get things done without help. Federal legal requirements exist already in medical, education, and government, and I'll be going into pretty deep details about those legal requirements in a moment. And then as it relates to school environments, with the whole push to online schools, I think it's important to understand, even prior to the children learning at home, there were a lot of caregivers that have trouble doing things that maybe the rest of us never thought about doing when my kids were in school. Things like checking their grades, going to the teacher's homepage, maybe finding out where the basketball game is, or gosh forbid, being able to add money to the children's hot lunch account. These are things that, if left to people with disabilities who are being blocked to that access, those things can't get done. And so there's an area of great improvement, obviously. The aging workforce, this is another one. I don't know what it would mean to be retired. I've had lots of jobs over the years. I think I found my stride here and have such a passion for what we do at A360, and I want to continue to do it for a very, very long time. Now, we're fortunate because our internal systems are fully accessible from the ground up, thanks to our CTO and the other developers that have contributed to that. But I know that in a lot of other jobs, that's not necessarily the case. So our hope is that the awareness and the education about digital accessibility, basically the lack of it out there, will drive people to do better. I can say that most companies, when they interact with Mary and I and the rest of the team members here at A360, we find that once they know better, they do want to do better. And so we just continue to do a tremendous amount of education and bringing people aware. The major areas of a business case for digital accessibility. Number one, obviously social responsibility. You would never think of putting up a new building and not having it physically accessible. And what we're hoping people start to think about is the fact that you would never create a new digital product and not make it work for everyone as well. It will increase your profits. The financial aspects for businesses looking at digital accessibility. It is a little bit less expensive to build accessibility in from the start, and we'll talk about that as one of the ways that we can support 08 in helping out clients out there. Mary did introduce the legal risk. You can't talk about digital accessibility without talking about the number of website accessibility and specific mobile app lawsuits and demand letters. I have been watching this for years. Mary shared that I've been teaching continuing legal ed on it domestically for 4 years and now have started to do international. What's really interesting to a lot of people is that the United States does not have a law on the books requiring, the most typical B2C businesses out there to be compliant, but we do have a tremendous amount of litigation. Conversely, Canada, the UK, and the EU countries, Australia, everybody else, they do have laws on the books requiring it, but the sad and odd thing is that they don't necessarily have more accessible websites or more accessible apps either. And the reason is they have no mechanism for enforcement. So they have these laws, but they're not enforced. In the EU, that's going to start changing. In Canada, it's already changing. And so different countries across the globe are kind of at different points in their journeys for digital accessibility. Let's take a look at those specifically related laws and the trends out there with those laws. Let me pause for just a quick second and check in with Hadley and Corey. Are there any questions that wanted to be asked by this point?
I think we've been able to get most of them answered via chat. If anybody has a question on anything we've discussed so far, feel free to raise your hand and we can get it answered.
Okay, great, thanks so much. So the Americans with Disabilities Act is the law that everyone uses when they describe this business compliance, right? And businesses are dealing with cybersecurity compliance. They're dealing with the kind of data protection, right? The GDPR stuff. And this third business compliance issue of digital compliance is very often mislabeled. They call it ADA compliance. And the reason I say that's a misnomer is, as I said, for B2C companies that are not government, healthcare, or public education, there is no law on the books. The Americans with Disabilities Act has not been amended to require digital accessibility. We just have, a tremendous amount of overwhelming case law. So what they're doing, these plaintiff attorneys, is they are bringing charges using Title III of the ADA, which prohibits discrimination in a place of public accommodation. And the law, or the line that they've drawn, is that the internet is a place of public accommodation, right? The internet's public. Pretty hard to argue with that point. And so that's how they're bringing the laws forward. There are a lot of other international laws as well. There are global initiatives, like in Canada, they have their own laws. The UN actually has laws out there. There are civil rights laws being used in the state of California and New York every single week to file lawsuits. But the Americans with Disabilities Act that was signed back in 1990 again, it's this Title III, places of public accommodation, that they're using. I'm going to talk about Title II, public entities, in just a second, and Title I is employment. Back to my comments a couple of slides previous about the need for digital accessibility. HR portals are a hot topic. There are certain plaintiff attorneys who are having their blind plaintiffs apply for jobs, and if they can't, they're filing suit immediately. Those lawsuits usually come in as class action, and they are expensive. And so the whole idea, and some of the things we're going to talk about today for tactical takeaways, is what you can do now to improve the accessibility on your website and thus reduce your risk of some settlements. And that's what I wanted to get into in this section. I'm going to jump down to, whoops, I think I went past it. One second.
Michelle, we do have a question here. If you can explain what Section 508 compliance is and the difference between that and WCAG.
I can. I have an awesome slide that shows that. I want to talk real quickly about the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. There were two amendments made to this law in 1998, and those amendments are Section 508 compliance and Section 504 compliance. Section 508 compliance requires the government to be accessible, and the amendment called Section 504 requires public education and healthcare to be compliant. The reason that is because healthcare and public education, K through 12, and any public college or university, you can think of it as if you can fill out a FAFSA to send a child there, it's public, right? You're using federal funds for your program. Section 504 governs accessibility for those. The reason healthcare is involved is because of Medicaid, Medicare, and now the Affordable Care Act. Let me jump down to a slide that articulates the differences in Section 508, and then I'll go back and cover some of these landmark cases because I think it's a really great question. So you can see here on the left-hand side, back in 2017, they had to give a notice period, right? Because since 1998 until 2007, there were these Section 508 digital compliance tests or guidelines written. And when we actually launched the company, it was expected that we use these success criteria or this testing that was written in 1998. Now imagine, if you will, for a second, using compliance standards from that long ago and try and apply them to the beautiful websites and apps that are built today, by 08 and other agencies. So it's just really crazy. We had really used the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.0 and level AA of it since we launched the company. But again, back to what Section 8 is in the refresh. Section 508 is, by amendment to that rehabilitation law, the requirements that government offered digital accessibility. Section 504 is within the same law, that amendment the same year, 1998, that has required it for education and for healthcare. Now, the truth of the matter is, even after the one-year notice period, and this went into effect, the fact that Section 508 now uses the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, version 2.0 level AA, there are not an overwhelming amount of government websites, healthcare, or public education websites that fully meet those. I do have a slide that I'll go back to that talks about different ways of enforcement. If you are in education, you can get sued in a civil court, or in the district courts, excuse me, you can get sued there and you can have demand letters there. But most often you might get a complaint from the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, and that is housed within the Federal Department of Education. And so those OCR claims were all the rage a couple of years ago. One of the reasons was there were a handful of advocates out there that were filing 10, 20, 30 of them a week, and they would bring those Office of Civil Rights claims violations to the Department of Education. And then if your education organization got one of those, then you had to go through a process. So we're very skilled at helping educational organizations through that and their agencies. But that's what Section 508 is. So if you are a Title II entity, if you are government, healthcare, or public education, going with version 2.0 level AA is really the way to go. Let me scooch back here to some of these national landmark cases. And again, understanding that Title II public entities covers government, medical, and public education. These are the types of organizations out there that there already is a law requiring digital accessibility. And as Hadley just asked and I answered, it's that old Section 508 amendment, and it's WCAG 2.0 level AA that you need to meet. These types of businesses, if you work for anybody else, a store, a bank, a theater, a bowling alley, a tanning salon, a storage unit, basically any other type of B2C business, from insurance to pest control, really anything out there. This is where a tremendous amount of the litigation is happening. So it all started back with another hometown company, Target. They were sued in 2006. The settlement came in 2008. It was a big one. They were ordered to pay $6 million plus 3.7 additional fees. Wells Fargo was hit with another big one. They settled in 2011 to the tune of $16 million. The reason I have the Netflix one up here is a really interesting topic. Some of you might be wondering, well, is it really a law if they're online only? You know, there's this concept that people use to talk about bricks and mortar, and a tie or a nexus, if you will, is what the law calls it, a nexus between your business and the online presence of your business. So what was super interesting that happened with the Netflix cases is that obviously Networks is all online, right? Just like Facebook or any of these other social media platforms or anything like that. In 2013, there was one case, and that federal court ruled that they did not have to be accessible because they did not have a bricks and mortar location. They were sued again in another district court. I think the second one happened in Massachusetts, and they were found that they did have to offer digital accessibility. And so this concept of nexus as to whether you do or you do not have to have that is separated across the nation based on which district you're in for federal court. But again, it's overwhelmingly in favor of the plaintiffs. There are very, very few cases that are found or settled for the defendant. I will talk about Omni Hotels International, though, because this is one where the defendant won. It is one where Aaron Cannon, our Chief Accessibility Officer, provided expert witness testimony at the second ever trial for website accessibility. The Winn-Dixie trial that happened way back in 2017 now was the first ever trial for this. This one was really important because the judge in Florida, it was the first time that a judge ruled that these were the standards. He also denied their motion to dismiss based on a financial undue burden. Winn-Dixie had just implemented the American Express Plenty point system, reward system, right? And they spent about $6.5 million doing that. And so the judge thought, you know, the $60,000 you need to spend to fix your website is not a financial undue burden. Interestingly, also down in this Florida district court, he also ruled that Winn-Dixie is responsible for all third-party vendors. Now, this is not the case in every district court, but again, because there is one that did it, the trends are that we need to watch any third-party vendors on our website. So chat functionality, if you have a third-party HR portal, if you use a review system, right, with stars and that type of thing, or a search engine, or any of those types of things where people might be interacting with a third party's digital content. This is something that we cover with all of our clients, and 08 has a plan to help support that remediation. My personal feeling, and often what we will tell you from A360 is, we don't feel that you should pay for it. Rather, what I personally would like to see is those third parties held accountable. For instance, in education, it's really difficult for a school to become fully compliant because they use a lot of plugins. They might use an LMS, a learning management system, a student information system, or a student management system for, admissions and things like that. So it's important to understand what, to take care of what you can take care of, and then with your third-party vendors, work with 08 and A360 to help advise those third-party vendors how to fix the errors in their code. So I'm going to keep cruising here. This is my icebreaker slide. This is what everybody feels like when they get a demand letter in the mail or get hit with one of these lawsuits. Oftentimes, regardless of whether you're an organization where there's already a law in the books, one of these things can be the first time that you ever heard of this. I have received calls from 8th grade English teachers in North Dakota and in Kentucky. You know, there's the office manager at the high school who's calling. They don't have internal teams to help them fix these things, and so they're in a little bit of a crisis, management mode at this point. This is where 08 can step in and by way of A360 support really help get things going right away. This slide in front of us now summarizes the common elements of Department of Justice settlement. So what I'm trying to educate everybody on the call is, this is what typically happens. I think this is the question on everybody's mind. What happens to other people? How do they get out of this? How do you even start to take care of this? Really important to understand. Oh, go ahead. Do you have a question? Yeah.
A couple questions coming in. So looks like we have several people joining us from Minnesota. So we are in Minnesota. Can we get sued? And what is the best thing to do if we do get sued?
Yeah, great question. So yes, you can get sued at any time for anything by anyone in the great old United States of America. So it's a great question because it also brings up the opportunity for me to explain there is nothing that 08 or A360, an auditing company, or even you can do to ever prevent a lawsuit. What we're trying to do is or a demand letter or an OCR claim, but what we're trying to do is help everybody get a plan together for if you do get a demand letter, an OCR claim, or a lawsuit, that you already have a plan in motion, because that is the key to a solid defense. It's really the strongest possible defense is a super strong offense, right? To borrow a sports analogy. The more you do ahead of time, the more defensible your organization is. And this is one of the main reasons, I think, Kathleen, Corey, that 08 chose A360 to work on behalf of their shared clients, because we bring a ready-to-go plan, which includes helping you post an accessibility statement. An accessibility statement does not mean you are accessible. You don't wait to put one up. You put up an accessibility statement that says, we intend to offer equitable access to everyone. We've taken some steps, like we've contracted with an audit. We're working with our agency to fix errors found in our audit. We are open to feedback. We offer 800 number and email. Call us and we'll help you if you're having any trouble on our website. And please give us feedback if you are having trouble. So it's really basically an open line of communication. Also common in any of these settlements, whether they come from the OCR, especially if they come from the OCR, the next two are required, and well, really the next four are required. But in the federal court systems, whether it's a state court or a federal court, these are common things that the plaintiff will require that you do in order to settle the claim with you. You should get technical training. This is available through 08 by way of A360's Knowledge Hub. We have everything any front-end content marketers might need, and it's one of the ways that we support 08 as well. You typically agree to monitor it after you get a letter of conformance. You could consider naming an accessibility coordinator from your team. This is not a new position, it's just adding a job description, right? Nothing new for any of us. Adding a job description to one of your lead development teams that they will be the coordinator. If you come from a big company, I'd suggest you look at maybe an accessibility committee. Take somebody from legal or compliance or risk management. Take somebody from the dev team, somebody from marketing, and get a business owner in there. Somebody with a checkbook. Put them all on that committee, and then document all the meetings you have and all the work that you've been doing. You could consider publishing a corporate policy of digital accessibility. And then again, the whole goal is to receive a letter of conformance from the auditor. Again, the other thing I wanted to tell you was, of all of these actions in state or federal court, whether it's a demand letter or lawsuit, 90% of them settle within 2 days to 2 months. So if you do get hit, right, back to my Frogger slide, if you do get hit, you need to take swift action, and you need to understand that you have two projects. You need to litigate it and solve it, right, but then you also need to work with 08 in order to fix the issues that are found. Any questions, any other questions, Hadley, popping up about where the claims might come from? Again, the Office of Civil Rights, this has to do if you're in education. Typically, you would get a claim from them, although you could also get a lawsuit in federal court. There's one plaintiff attorney who sued like 8 colleges in upstate New York a year and a half ago. You know, they're marketing, they're going out there doing all that stuff. You might get a demand letter first. A demand letter is just basically a note that tells you they plan to sue you. That's what a demand letter is. A lot of plaintiff attorneys just skip the demand letter and they just go right ahead and file a suit. If you ever get one and you see scary things like demand for jury trial and class action certification, you know, underway, they all say that. So, you know, it's scary enough to get it, but some of the stuff they put in there is even more scary. We went through the Section 508 guidelines. Any questions now that would be appropriate? I might skip VPAT and come back to it. And then have you just kind of maybe ask the audience if there's a lot of people that are in the government or education space, because then a VPAT might come into place.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did get a question, what's happening with the OCR claims, and is a demand letter the same as an OCR letter?
Okay, great question. So no, they're different. Demand letters come from federal or state court, and it's basically a plaintiff attorney filing paperwork on you. They have to register it at court, you get it in the mail, and that's the one that says, we're fixing to sue you. An Office of Civil Rights claim is very specific. It comes from the Office of Civil Rights. It will say Federal Department of Education in it, and it will have a strict process for you to go through. You can still do that with 08 and A360. It's a little bit different from our commercial products and services, but we've done them for years and years, and we actually have templates and all that kind of stuff to do it. If you can imagine, this is a lot about looking at your internal processes and setting up for continued care of digital accessibility. So demand letters, federal or state court, Office of Civil Rights claims, those come from the Department of Education, and those only come to educational organizations. I've never seen an Office of Civil Rights claim against a company, although, not to confuse anybody, the plaintiff's attorneys might use civil rights laws in order to bring your case. So hopefully I'm being pretty clear. It's a lot of technical legal stuff, but I just want you guys to all be very well aware. One thing I wanted to go back to this slide and review is, if you've done some reading, you might know that WCAG 2.1 came out almost 2 years ago now. It builds on everything in 2.0. There are 3 brand new guidelines in it, and it's really just keeping up with all the fancy stuff the fancy people at the agencies do, right? Like all the different things that they do on websites now. There are 17 new tests that you can do, 12 of which are level AA. And most of these new tests have to do with new input modalities that didn't exist when this one was written in 08. So if you just want to keep it in a bucket or in the back of your mind, mobile responsive sites and different things like that, you can have some additional tests done. I don't see court cases settling for anything but 2.0 right now. They typically ask for 2.1. The other thing is you'll see a lot of other vendors or competitors to A360 talking about 2.1. It isn't required. It's certainly not required for public entities like government, healthcare, and public education, but it's out there. We have clients working on it either by choice or the fact that they've already received a letter of conformance and their agencies got them to 2.0, and then they're working on 2.1 now. So let's just kind of summarize with some trends, and then we're going to get into some specifics, kind of some tactical things. The trends overall in ADA compliance are this. Number one, your competition is paying attention. So you should be getting going on this. People will use it in their organizations as a differentiator. You can imagine if you're an insurance company, the ones that have worked with us, you know, they can prove that their app and all their features and functionality work for everybody, and that is a true differentiator. If you're a platform company and 08's working on something like that, it can be a huge differentiator for you. Live user audits have completely replaced automated scanning tools. I'll talk about tools in a minute. Everybody has them. We have one too. They're very limited in their ability to test fully for the WCAG compliance issues, so I'll dive deeper into that in a moment. General public, as Mary said when she introduced me, is really demanding equitable access, especially in this time of COVID. We see it with our own employees. We get so many internal Slacks or emails from our services team that are stuck at home across the nation, right? The auditors, different companies that they need to use to order groceries and things like that. we couldn't be more proud of one of our biggest clients, Instacart. They're really leading the way, and their internal mechanisms are implanted into a lot of other grocery stores. So just super, super proud of those companies that are doing the right thing. As I said many times, some of you are already required by law to be compliant, but me going through this might be the first time you've heard of it. That is not. That has happened to me many, many times before. The plaintiff firms are incredibly active. New websites are frequently targeted by plaintiffs. I think some of them, with their internal marketing teams, just look at new sites, and that's why we've worked with 08 to put together a plan for helping you when you choose to build a new site or refresh. We can get accessibility built into that for you. Again, settling one claim or lawsuit does not prevent another. You must fix your digital products. This point about getting multiple letters or getting more than one lawsuit is something that I've been working on for a couple of years with the top ADA defense attorneys that I work with, and A360 serves their clients for a long time. We've put together a lot of features in our own dashboard which automatically log the milestones of everything that you've done, and it gave birth to one of our signature reports, which is called this Affidavit of Accessibility Activities. So if we're lucky enough to do some business together and 08's improving the digital accessibility on your behalf, then if you get a lawsuit or a demand letter, we can go back and easily pull out of the system everything that's been done already. And again, like I said before, your best defense in these situations is really a good, strong, solid offense. So becoming digitally accessible. I have a technical wingman on the call with me today. Lanny is one of our auditors. And if we have any specific questions about overlay tools or some of the technical things, I'll invite him to speak. Number one, he has an awesome voice. He should be a radio DJ, but he's just super, also just incredibly knowledgeable. And sometimes it's nice to listen to somebody else's voice during a whole hour. So if we have any specific questions on those, I'll invite Lanny to participate. So Hadley and Corey, if you could make sure that he's got an open track to answer any questions. But live user audits, this is truly the only way to determine accessibility and/or compliance. There are other, so-called solutions. I'm using my, finger air quotes over here. There are things like overlay tools and toolbars. Let me talk about kind of the general concept of those and why they don't work, and then you might understand why I often refer to them kind of as the Harry Potter method of website accessibility. Remember back in the beginning when I said that people with disabilities use their own assistive technology, like this refreshable braille display that's pictured over here on the right-hand side. It's the current slide that's up. There isn't anything you download to make that work. You just make sure the code is marked up correctly and coded for design and development in a way that enables usability and digital accessibility, and that's how you solve it. A lot of lawyers are very worried about security risks by downloading something or having something else installed on your website. That makes sense to me. And again, scanning tools, kind of the rage years ago was to scan a website. People talk about that all the time. I'm going to scan my website. Any scan, any SaaS tool, right, software as a service tool, any of these scanning tools, ours included, can only cover a portion of the WCAG guidelines. So they all return a little bit of false positives. Here at A360 for 08 clients, we will make sure that you never get, if you ever get down the path and you're using our scanning tool later, we're going to check and verify that those things are real issues before we'd ever deploy any hours to fix them, right? You want to make sure that it's not a false positive. There is a concept out there that is really probably hopefully going away, but it's the idea of a separate but equal website. This is something that Nike did. It's something that a couple of other big companies did, and it was a big PR snafu. There was a case against Scandinavian Airlines because they tried it. People will tell you that they can create a fully new accessible website for you, and you don't have to fix the one you have. Now, stop and think about that for a minute. If you have one website that you need to keep up and you need to spend money on, why would you want another one where you have to try and duplicate all your efforts, all your costs, rather than just go back and fix the one that you originally had, right? So I can answer any more questions about that. This slide really gives us a conversation to talk about why we don't use scanning tools in diagnosis. I'll be honest, I think every agency, lots of people inside of a company, we've all tried these scanning tools. it's super, super important to understand that no matter what tool it is, it can never check for all the WCAG success criteria because so much of that is manual. This independent study from the UK, I like using. Quickly, they built a website, put 143 known issues in, and of the ones that you can scan for, they found this percentage of errors. So, you know, for what it's worth, scanning tools can be used by developers later on when maintaining things. That's our position on them. If you ever use it to determine if your site's accessible, you'll be leaving about 75% of the test out of the equation. So, let's move into the takeaway section of today's talk because we have at least 10 minutes left, and like Mary said, we're happy to stay on and answer any additional questions. I know that 08 is recording the webinar, so it's important to get all the questions in so we can record all those answers for future participants or anybody who rewatches it. I put together a couple of slides about how 08 can help. It's really important to understand that they can help in a multitude of different ways. So on your current website, they can get a baseline audit from A360. We will prioritize 08 clients. We've made a commitment to that because of our partnership, and that means that you'll get placed into our queue and you will get your audit back. If an audit is all you can do in 2020, it's a great start, knowing where you're at, right? Finding out, we call it the diagnosis part of it, right? Find out how sick the website is. A lot of the websites have been out there a long time. Digital accessibility is super new. It's very new to agencies. It's very new to companies. It's not taught in coding school. That's why we're a bunch of ex-agency people specializing in this, right? And so it's really important to understand that everybody is really at the same starting point. Most websites, almost 85, 90% of them across most business verticals are not yet accessible. So there's work to do by everybody. If you're going to build a new site, this is a prime opportunity to work accessibility in, and 08 can build accessibility features and even full compliance in if it's your wish prior to launch. We can work together on special consulting too. If you do get an OCR claim, if you need a VPAT, we'll cover that in Q&A. If you need any type of special consulting, we can draft a special plan with 08 leading the charge there for you guys. These next two slides, not necessarily the last two, but these next two really articulate the two ways that you can interact with 08 and A360. As I said, you can get an audit, which will diagnose what's wrong. And then step two would be remediation support. We would work alongside supporting 08 through fixing those things that we identify in the audit. You could call this the treatment protocol, right, if you wanted to, and then move on to maintenance. Again, if you're looking at possibly building a new site, prime opportunity to work it in. What we would do is we'd meet with 08 when they finalize the new designs. We would give support and advice on the different types of things the client is planning on putting in, what to do about image carousels, how are we going to handle accordion menus, things like that. And then during the build, we would work together with the goal of launching that new product fully accessible. The reason why this is so important is most organizations fix things like later. They build and then they get an audit. I think it's the third big takeaway I'm trying to impress on everybody today is the sooner you start thinking about digital accessibility, the less it will cost to put in. There's still going to be costs, but if you can think about this concept as just kind of that whole shift left concept, you wouldn't build a house sheetrock it and then decide where you want your outlets, right? You put your outlets in when the walls are open. So keep thinking about that concept. And with regard to new sites, plan to create an accessible experience. Talk about it early on. Figure it into the budget. The accessible site and architecture in the frameworks, right? Use HTML best 5 practices for accessibility. This is what 08 is going to do for you on a new site build. During development, they'll continue to have multiple check-ins. And then with regard to third parties, I mentioned earlier that I'd circle back to this. This is a wonderful opportunity to really leverage the network of A360. If you want to know what version of CAPTCHA you should be using to make sure it's accessible, we know. If you want to know the most accessible chat function companies out there, we know. If you want to know, a lot of the third-party plugins, if they're offering accessibility or not, we know. So lean on us and O8 to get you paired up with the best solutions possible. And then together we can all put some influence, hopefully positive pressure on those that haven't yet fixed theirs, so that all websites and apps can become accessible. I do have a couple of things in here, more tactical things like PDFs, steps to reduce a claim or lawsuit, and then really just a summary slide. But with the moments that are left, 5 minutes left, I want to toss it back over to Hadley, see if there's any further questions. And then Lanny, if you're on, I might ask you to just kind of walk through a couple of those concepts on PDFs. PDFs are something that, maybe in some business verticals aren't used very often anymore. I do happen to know they're used still quite a bit in medical and in education, and so I did want to cover that. The second reason for covering it, it's something that you, the client, might do, right? You might give it to the agency to upload onto the site. The more you can have the agency create them and make sure they're accessible is probably better, but I understand the business situation out there. Hadley, any other further questions from the crew out there?
It looks like you answered a couple of them in the last couple of slides, but if anybody has any more, feel free to throw them in the chat or raise your hand. One question that is being asked is, we scan our site every month. Are we doing enough?
Great question. So scanning the site every month. If you scan your site every month, if you use one tool, you'll probably just be scanning the same issues over and over again. I have heard that people that try different tools, or even those that use the same tool every month, sometimes you get different results. Absolutely, if you're going to use different tools, you'll get different results. I don't think there's any problem in scanning your website. If that gives you a comfort level, if you want to archive those reports. But what I will say is I really honestly don't think it's enough. And the reason I don't is because of the progression of this understanding, right? I said digital accessibility is new to everybody. So, agencies are paying attention to this. Those like O8 are driving this, right, and making sure their clients are aware of it. You're only going to ever cover about a quarter of the tests out there. If you take action on those scanning tool reports, that's probably the worst thing. Not a bad thing to scan it, right? You're curious, but to take action on them and invest time, money, energy, and resources without knowing if it's a real issue, that I think is a big mistake, right? So again, live user auditing is the way to properly diagnose things. And so we hope that any money that you can spend on building your case of offering equitable access will be spent on a live user audit or assessment. If you're not facing legal activity or action, then just get an assessment. Put some money towards it to mark that in 2020 you did it, especially if you're in an industry where you're legally required to do it. There's a lot of strain on businesses these days, and there might not be money available for it. The worst thing to happen is a legal action, and then you have to find the money for it, and that's worse. So do what you can ahead of time. Work with O8, and A360 is here to support you through that.
Perfect. I think we have Annie walk through some of those final slides and then close it out. That would be great.
Okay, good. Lanny, can you hear me, and can I hear you?
Can you hear me okay? I've been kind of muting myself just to make sure I don't interrupt or cause any waves that may or may not need to be made.
No, you are here. Yay. So Lanny is the lead auditor here at A360. I've had the privilege of speaking with him before, and we work on a lot of things together. So the one slide that I have up is about PDF. I tried to keep things kind of elementary. We can certainly talk about anything else that people have questions on. Now's your time to ask them because Lanny's got the mic. So with PDF, Lanny, what tips can you give the listeners on making sure that PDFs, even, internal communication documents like memos and PowerPoints and stuff like that. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll briefly talk about PDFs have a lot of power in so much as you're capable of, let's say you can take a snapshot of your website, you could load that snapshot as an image and put that in your PDF and send off as PDF to all sorts of individuals, and that's a great way to communicate information. The problem with that is a lot of PDFs that do that incorporate images. There's no way for a screener or certain users to be able to interact with the elements inside that PDF. It's essentially just a glorified image, no offense, that can pretty much be completely inaccessible. Ideally, when PDFs are created, you create them in the same or similar way as you would any other Word document. Headings and text and tables that are marked up or that are written properly, and then load those up as PDFs. Another thing to remember with PDFs is that they have a set accessibility function that you can make sure, it's a toggle feature that when you create your PDF, that you can set the accessibility so that there are certain tags that are applied to certain elements inside the PDF. Without that accessibility checkbox marked, then a lot of elements that would be more accessible to screener users wouldn't be. So it's really just a simple go into your your file system edits and just make sure that that checkbox is checked. Otherwise, it could cause problems. And there's always the possibility.
Forms.
Yep, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, Lenny. PDF forms too. I see a lot. Like people put up, especially like applying for things, right? We do that all the time with form fills, but sometimes people will put up a PDF form, right, to fill it in. I mean, we just transferred a title on a car to one of our children, and we went online at the DMV, and so you come across these all the time in our daily lives, right? PDFs that are a clickable form.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things to remember that any digital media that you present to anyone, let's say either inside your organization or send out as emails or so on and so forth, there's always the potential risk that if you're relying on other services to create that PDF, that you have to essentially rely that they're making that PDF accessible in your behalf. And so it's something to keep in mind that you want to make sure that as much control as possible is given to when you make PDFs or when you make any type of digital content, because at the end of the day, whatever you send out, you're responsible for. You have to be very careful of that.
Right. So what I'll say about PDFs is I understand that they may be going by the wayside, right? There's lots of other creative and really beautiful ways and other interactive ways, more current ways to present that information. So there might be some people listening that might say, hey, let's just do it in a different way. I fully support that, right? But if you have some and you have to keep them for some reason, course catalogs, whatever it is, there's ways around it. I want to leave you with just a couple of quick takeaways, right? Steps to reduce risk of claim or lawsuit. Get some type of evaluation done as soon as you can. Get it done by a third party. Start making some fixes if you can. Ask 08, work with them on, if you're in the middle of trying to decide if you're going to build a new site or revamp the old one. Talk about how this could impact it, and be open and get feedback from your consumers. If you do, then you might start to see that there is a real need for this, and knowledge is key. But even if you don't, you'll be positioning yourself as an organization that is offering true inclusivity, right? Especially with HR portals and all those different types of things. So I will just wrap up with this slide. Making your website digitally accessible should be viewed as a process. It's not a bug list or a thing that you do in August and then you don't do it anymore. Start early, think about your third parties, get going and do something here in 2020 with 08. And lean on us. Mary started, with a really nice introduction. And it's one of the things that she said was, I think, rings true. I see companies every day saying, I have a little bit of time. I want to improve this. Can I learn a little bit more? So reach out to 08 for some questions. We're happy to support that. And I'm happy to answer any other questions, Hadley, that came up.
Yeah, I think we are good to go on questions. I haven't seen any more come through, but we can definitely follow up by sending the recording of this video out. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Corey, any of the 08 and A360 team. Corey, you want to close us out?
Yeah, I mean, Michelle, Mary, Lanny, we can't thank you enough. I think we can all agree that was extremely informative and valuable. And yeah, we'll be in touch and we'll follow up with our attendees on the video and this content. And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, have a great day.